Oh, I can, but I don't have one down here. But that doesn't mean I can't go get one.
You want to go get one? Yeah. Well, I don't need you to, but if you want one, go grab it.
Hey, I have no problem unwinding on the Thursday
I'll do
night.
the beer pour while you're gone. If you got this part of the video, you've got the live unedited edition. Home Gadget Geeks Thursday night. It's January 13th. It's 8 p.m. in the Central Time Zone. If you caught this any other time than that, you've got the recorded version. Mike Wieger, Christian Johnson with me tonight. Mike, John, I'm on beer 3 of 4 from John Biggs. He sent this to me. Is that Trogs? Is that how you think you pronounce that?
Trog Nation?
Trog Nation, yeah. Trog. Yeah. It's a Troganator. We'll call it Trogs.
Oh, Troganator. Okay.
Yeah. But see. So John sent this to me. 8.2.
Oh, all right.
Brewed with Pennsylvania grains, chocolate. A chocolate Munich Pilsner is what they're saying.
Well, I'm really curious what the one last week is, because you made a point to message me. I saw that message actually when I was going. When you messaged me tonight, I was looking at my, you actually sent me more messages about the beer. It must have been really good.
It was really good. John, thanks for
making a road trip to get it or something.
Yeah, we need to. Like you and me. That's we need to do a Home Gadget Geeks road trip.
Beer road show.
Getting his beer. Yeah, that was a nitro. It's a New York beer. I should remember the name of it. You can go back to the video. I show a big picture of it in the video. But, dude, that was the most chocolatey, delicious, smooth. I know we're not supposed to, when you're talking about food, you're not supposed to call it smooth. But it was really good. This one, let's just give it a taste. Here's the.
All right.
There's the pour. So a little amber, a little more amber than it looks in the camera, but not quite as dark as last week. I got a nice little head going on the finger. Oh, a little sweeter. Little almost like Oktoberfest-ish.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. John, thanks for sending that. Let me go big screen just so you can see that there. If you want to send me your beer to take, super good, John. This is really good, but more Oktoberfest and chocolate. If you want to send me your beer, send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv, and we'll do it in the pre-show pour. Christian, what did you grab?
Jailbreak Brewery in Maryland. It's a Belgian IPA, and I won't let the FCC censor the label there. So. We'll have to read it to get the real sauce.
You have to go on the video. What's kind of the flavors of that?
This one's kind of orangey, and it's light on the bitter side. So pretty simple, but they do a nice job. They have a lot of different stuff.
Tony says good night for warm apple cider. We'll talk about the weather in the show. We'll save that for it. John is saying a chocolate stout. That was last week's, was a chocolate stout. Seriously, Wieger, we need to make a 2-hour, because I found them down in Platte City.
I was gonna say, it was in Platte City. It's not far at all.
No, and it's right off. It's literally, as you're going into Kansas City, kind of Platte City's the first that exit. There's a quick
QT
quick
over there.
Yeah.
Yep, I know exactly where that's at. We stop there all the time.
Taco Bell. Right across the street from that, there's a little strip mall, and they're right in there. So I've thought of calling them and saying, "Hey, do you got some of this beer?" And if they said yes. I was like, 2-hour road, because it's 2 hours down, 2 hours back. So it's,
my parents pass that once a week because they do the Kansas City to Omaha trek.
Okay, well, have them stop would they do that?
They'd for sure stop it.
They carry it back? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they're okay being mules?
Yeah, they're okay being liquor mules.
It's not like they're trafficking anything.
No.
So I think they're okay. Well, I'll call down there to see what they've got.
Yeah.
In stock, and super good.
It's so weird. At the beginning of every show, I always monitor the stats, make sure nothing's going crazy. I just put in a new CPU in this rig with the upgrade, and with everything that's going on right now, it's using 3% of my CPU. And that's just it's unreal. I went to the Ryzen 9 5900X, and this thing it's kind of stupid fast. At least for what I'm used to. I'm not used to working with super fast 12.
It's kind of nice, isn't it?
Have some 24 thread
modern equipment
CPU. It's wild.
Yeah, this Mac never struggles with anything I do. So
I feel it. That's what I kind of felt like when I first put this thing in. I'm like, I wonder if this is what Jim felt like with the M1. Just kind of like, wow, this is
well, and
more speed than I'll need.
the Core i7 that I had before worked just fine. But Christian, what do you run in for your desktop at this point?
I'm on the Dark Hero AM4 with the 5950X Ryzen.
Oh, 5950X, nice.
64 gigs DDR4 3600 and the Western Digital Black 850 Dragon M2, and I have an older EVGA 1070 card in here because I just couldn't quite play the video card game right now.
Oh,
so
it's ridiculous.
yeah,
It's
I built it in. Yeah,
that 5950X is like, it's 4 more cores than the 5900X, right? It's like a 16 core.
Oh no, it's double. Yeah, it's 16 core but 16 threads, so you get 32 assignable threads to the OS, and the thing is just very overclockable.
Okay.
I've been able to hit up to 5 gigahertz single core clock
Really?
speeds on it, and all core with like fans running very low. I have it water cooled, of course, but all core I can do 4.2 and up to 4.6, I think is the closest I've gotten all core. And I was just like, that's too much voltage. So I'm totally happy at 4. It's super quiet. I feel super heartwarmed that Ken remembers Flamethrower. Flamethrower is alive and well. We had to make some adjustments though. It's now kind of, I call it the basement chiller because the water cooler on it died. And so it truly was Flamethrower because I remote desktop in that box still quite a bit. And one day it just kind of randomly didn't answer. I was like, that's super odd. I always leave it on, whatever. And I go over, turn it on, boot it up. Fine. Come back like an hour later, it's off again. I'm like, uh-oh. And so it was like it finally happened like a decade later. The water cooler just had enough crud that built up in it that there was no circulation going on. And I ended up putting a Be Quiet, the giant heat sink with the double fan. And the thing doesn't break like 27 Celsius with the box running. It's nuts. So I leave it running in my workbench where I build servers and desktops, and I use it as a secondary machine. So I keep my Windows 10 in sync between my main and Flamethrower, and I put a really quiet 1050 Ti card in there. So it's just like super quiet box, does its own thing, and it's my emergency backup if something weird happens with this.
Isn't it amazing how far, like, especially Ryzen? Am I?
No, I hear you.
Okay.
Oh, I'm on mute. Something happened.
Did you mute us?
Uh-oh.
He lost us.
Did it go to your earbuds?
But he doesn't have in?
I bet the Bluetooth finally kicked in, and
after all this time, the AirPod Pros finally decided to connect.
That's what Jim said. He goes, I bet they actually connected right now.
Really awesome. Really awesome. Gotta love it.
It only took the Bluetooth. That's a good 15 minutes.
So you can hear us now?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Well, I was just saying, it's crazy how far the Ryzen series has come. I was doing a Cinebench test on the 5900X, and it kicks the butt of the first gen Threadripper 1950X, and I was like, it's kind of wild.
It's arguably one of the best consumer chips that's been built. Period. The price.
You think so?
Oh yeah, price per performance. I mean, tell me one software application that can come close to crushing the Zen 3 architecture. I mean, there's just software is years behind being able to take full advantage of this unless you're doing fairly intensive 3D video rendering or the alike. So it's I mean, the new AM5 socket they're talking about for the next stuff, that thing's going to be so future bulletproof by the time it comes out. Like, I feel very comfortable that the Zen 3 architecture was a great series of technology to make the upgrade for, because, Flamethrower, I always said, build to spec, have it last 10 years. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if I got at least 15 years out of this desktop build. I mean, that's just where the software is at this point.
And did you say you jumped to DDR5, or you haven't made that jump yet?
No, I'm on DDR4. DDR5 will come out with the AM5 socket for the Zen 4 architecture, which is going to be probably at least 5,000 megahertz clock speeds for DDR. So what people are going to do with that, I don't know. Like, it's going to be pretty awesome. But
so there's no way to use that with Ryzen right now. It's only, is it on the Intel side already? Because there are boards coming out that support it, right?
I don't think there's any chip yet that's doing DDR5 commodity. I'm sure someone's going to post in chat that I'm wrong, and that's probably
they
awesome
can post
too,
and we can get educated on it. PCI 6 looks pretty good too.
Yeah.
So like it's, well, you know what? We should actually like start the show. This is all this good. This is bonus. This is you know, for the folks who come to the pre-show.
You get a little extra.
This is the bonus content.
Yeah.
All right. Let me open things up and let's get things going. Here we go. This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks show number 520, recorded on January 13th, 2022. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here, Mike, in Bellevue, where you couldn't tell for the last 3 days that tomorrow we have winter storm warnings. It's been like 50, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what they're expecting tomorrow, 3, 4, 5 inches. I don't know. Have you heard?
I think it's 3 to 6 is the latest update for us. Yeah,
I know they're spraying the
supposedly
streets
more
down.
to the east now. It's supposed to be. We were going to be heavier, and now it's more to the east of
That's
us.
always the way it is. They always tease us, and then they're like, you know, oh, just kidding. So, anyways,
I get more scared when they underestimate because every time they tell us it's going to be a blizzard, we get a dusting. But it's usually the small ones where it's like, oh yeah, it shifted, and now we did get a blizzard.
The cold weather we had, I think, shifted to the East Coast. Christian, you guys a little chilly there. Christian Johnson's with us tonight. A little chilly there in the DC area.
Yeah, it got down to like 18 yesterday and through this morning, and I think we're also going to be seeing some snow this weekend. So we're continuing winter trends here.
Yeah, well, we've got warm weather ahead of that. You know, you guys get it a couple days after we do. So we'll send you a little warm weather, and then it'll get cold again. But it's just Tuesday night, I went out and did a fire in the back. It was 50 degrees. And I was like, holy cow. Well, of course, we got Christian Johnson. We'll post some great show notes out at the AverageGuy.tv. Big thanks to Aaron Lawrence, who stepped in. Mike had to step out last week, and Aaron came in, and we just got about an hour with her, and she just nailed the content in about 50 minutes. And so big thanks to Aaron for doing that as well. Mike, everything's good on your end as far as
it was a car issue. I needed to go bring the car back home and trying to see if we get it to start back up. So we got it home and we got everything figured out. And and then this week my car decided to act up. It's just been a car week for us, but everything's all good.
It's wintertime.
It's the cold weather.
I lost a battery too. I lost a battery. Yeah, it's just the cold. It just knocks that.
My heat shield in the bottom of my Jeep decided to fall off, but it didn't decide to fall off. It decided to hold on by a thread and rattle, and I didn't know what was rattling. It was what just drove me nuts for like 4 days. I'm like, this doesn't sound good. Finally got under there, and it was just hanging on by a thread.
Christian, you guys have a Jeep, right? Too. How's that getting? Is that getting you through the snow and such?
Yeah, it's great. We have the Rubicon 2016 in that lime green color that they don't make anymore. They make hyper green, but they don't make, or maybe it's the other way around. We have hyper green and they have a weird lime green, but yeah, rock solid.
That's a sweet ride. I rode in that when I was out there a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
A year ago, I guess now it's just a year and some change, and super cool. A reminder, we get started. We've been doing or premiering the video on YouTube out at my YouTube account. So go to the AverageGuy.tv/YouTube, subscribe, and on Saturdays at noon Central, we replay this. Gives me a chance to jump in the chat room without having to be running the show at the same time. And for some folks who can't make it on Thursday, it's a great opportunity to have that same kind of chat experience on Saturdays. And finding we're getting kind of a different crowd, which is kind of cool. You can join us just because you're here now. Doesn't mean you can't join us on Saturdays. Or if you just a regular podcast listener, a couple hundred of you guys do that, join us on Saturdays. The AverageGuy.tv/YouTube. Subscribe so you'll get the notification. That way you don't forget. And we'll continue to do that. And then 2 weeks from now on the 27th, Mike and I are going to take the post show to Discord. So you're going to want to be here for that little Discord audio. Everybody can jump in and kind of have a chat. We're going to give it a try. Maybe shoot for the last Thursday of the month and give those a try. So if you want to join us, come out live on the 27th, January 27th, 2022. And if you're listening to this after the fact, we missed you. Sorry about that. Christian Johnson is hanging out with us tonight. Christian, of course, a longtime host from, if you're new to Home Gadget Geeks, Christian kind of helped me kick this whole thing off like 10 plus years ago. Christian, is it a little weird to be back? I mean, we had you back in the fall, but when you come back to Home Gadget Geeks, is it a little weird coming back, or does it settle right in?
It's never weird, but it feels like a kid I never had that left for college and, kind of comes back to see the parents once every 5 years. So
Yeah, there's maybe a little bit of that going on. It's always good to catch up. Let's do a little catch up on Maplegrove Partners. Maplegrove Partners kind of supports, sponsors, hosts here at on Home Gadget Geeks and everything we do for the Average Guy.tv. We've Christian's kind of, I want to say, built it around me, or maybe in spite of me, Maplegrove Partners for the work what we do. Any updates you want to share going on at Maplegrove Partners as far as hosting goes, or work on that?
yeah, we're having a ton of fun, and really focused around Jim is still to this day our model customer use case. So folks that need to get up and running on a LAMP stack equivalent application and do podcasts, community hosting, etc. We operate out of 2 locations on the East Coast. We're still doing failover, so we have live failover and power redundancy implemented now, and we've been getting more servers built into racks and getting hardware built out. So we're staying ahead of the demand curve. It still plans as cheap as $10. We haven't let inflation change that at all.
I said that last week. Inflation-proof plans.
Yep, we haven't let PayPal charge rates or anything else change it. It's $10 for great service. You get to deal with me and my kindred. We try to make it easy and fun and friendly. Not the 1-800, and you have someone who's helping you make sure your content's safe. Like we don't really do the content development side. That's on you to bring your community your content, but we make sure it's running, it's optimized, it's working well. And it's not like your typical shared hosting provider where that $10 a month drops you on a node oversubscribed with thousands of people. And if it goes out, like it's a painful 1-800 call, we're basically over provisioning resources to the extent that we can for customers, putting them on gigabit and soon multi-gigabit fiber plans for their upstream and downstream into their server and their SFTP services. And we're making it a fun place to drop your audio files and build a community. So
it's pretty great. How are you guys acquiring hardware? I mean, I know you were always looking for great deals and buying stuff that made sense. You were finding things that would work well that maybe other people missed out on. How are you acquiring?
That's still like one of the magic tenets of Maplegrove is that most people think they have to buy the greatest and latest to get the speed of what people notionally want to call Web 3.0 now. And really, most of the web applications out there, we're seeing some really interesting trends. One is that PHP and these other compiled languages and interpretive languages that are powering web services just generically on the internet, they continue to get more efficient. So you can do more with the same amount of hardware. That's one trend that's just continuing to accelerate. We're seeing it not only in the languages getting more efficient, but also the databases. So, MySQL 5 versus MySQL 8 on the same hardware benchmarked, the transactions per second are totally different between the two. So that's one trend that's giving a lot of overhead. The second trend is that typically, if you buy hardware in the 3 to 4 years after it's like brand shiny new, it is just that right balance of having the newer generation hardware features without compromising on performance, but also not paying top dollar. So in the early days of Maplegrove, where we were scrounging these huge upright workstations that were kind of like all-in-one towers, and we were stuffing 128 gigs of DDR2 RAM it was back then, can you believe it or not, and had these huge heat sinks on it and building hypervisors. Like we've gotten away from that. We've moved more towards rack mount, and we've moved towards PowerEdge as a platform to start standardizing around and buying in that, like I said, that 4-year horizon. So still DDR4 stuff. You don't need super fast clock speeds for DDR4 RAM to have a fast experience. Most of the stuff that really has seen an impact on web performance is much more about disks. So invest in the M2s, invest in the flash memory for disks, but don't go crazy on clock speeds and CPU, because quite honestly, lamp stacks, like I said, they just keep getting more efficient. So unless you've written some crazy, slow, and inefficient MySQL query that's part of your web application, chances are you don't need a crazy hardware platform to run it. And then really just making the software services such that you get the high availability, right? So power outages or interruption, fiber peering or interruption, and basically having your content automatically replicated and synchronized between at least two sites at a given time, so that if a site that traffic is being hosted out of fails, your content is automatically weighed away and started to be hosted out of the other zone. So we've tried both active as well as active hot spare, and we're kind of happy right now in the active hot spare model. It takes about on average 60 seconds for DNS to flip over. We're using some low TTL records and some premium DNS services to have 29 Anycast servers around the globe. So DNS resolution to Maplegrove hosted services is quite fast, while your content stays hosted privately and locally on Maplegrove hardware.
It was great being in your house and using the Maplegrove network while I was there. That was pretty great. Mike, do you have a question?
Well, okay, I'll just ask the question. Lamp stack. You gotta get, what's a lamp stack? You
Linux, Linux, PHP, MySQL. So it's really just saying, the fundamental things you need to run WordPress are those three things. You need Linux operating system. It's got to have a PHP processor on it, and you got to reach out to a MySQL database or equivalent.
Okay.
Christian, what about, we come out of the home server space, right, from long ago. And what about, someone who's thinking of, they still want to keep some storage. We've been talking a lot of Unraid here over the last year or so. Mike, we've shown up in the Unraid newsletter now twice, not even trying, which is great. Spencer over there at Unraid has really hooked us up. But Christian, from a hardware perspective, if I was thinking about building my own NAS, or I want a little more home server space, does that hardware purchasing methodology still hold true? Do I look for that 4-year-old server stuff coming off lease? That seems like it's probably, these are on 3 or 4-year leases maybe that they're coming off. Is that the same strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple things specifically to when you're buying NASs in this kind of Goldilocks zone that's important. One is, if you go too old in the hardware, what you typically find is that the power supply efficiency and utilization is crappy. So you end up spending a lot of money to keep it running. If you buy too new, again, when you really look at the use case for the home user, you're probably not expecting to push 500 megabytes per second or greater on a NAS, right? We think of it more as kind of like long-term persistent storage, a place to offload. Yeah, you're going to want the ability to stream pictures and music and video off of that NAS, maybe to a smart television or equivalent, but you don't need the kind of enterprise performance that's expected when you throw, 60 disks in a SAS enclosure and you want it to be screaming, right? That's really not what we're talking about. There are tons of PowerEdge configurations in particular, which is the one I'm pretty excited about lately, where you can get both 4-drive, 8-drive, in both the 2.5-inch form factor and the 3.5-inch form factor. And we're talking like a couple $100 to get the CPU, the RAM, the box, and, buy new drives, don't buy used. Go pick up, 4 10 terabyte drives, and that thing will last you forever. It really will. And one of the things that I think we learned the hard way from the home server show days is that this community knows better than anyone that my dad and I absolutely loved building the ripped toaster, so to speak, right? So the HP Media Smart Enclosure, where instead of the single core Celeron, we built them out with quad core Intel and put the BIOS on it to support that CPU. We maxed out the RAM. We put large drives in. And while the form factor was great, the ventilation sucked. And so I now have about 10 years of data comparing drive failure rates, and almost all of my drives have failed coming out of MediaSmart boxes. I have RAID enclosures that have crossed their 10-year mark, and we've lost maybe like one drive in it. It's nuts. So really important to think about ventilation in the form factor. If you can, if you have the space for it, and everyone likes the cutesy little thing that sits on the shelf and is very quiet, but if you're willing to look at just a notch up from that, and you can still look for passive cooling, etc., but something that has airflow to it over those discs, it's going to make a huge difference in how long you get out of that hardware. And you can end up building very effective NASs in that time frame of hardware life.
That temperature thing is huge. I mean, even in just my short span of running a few different NAS types, I would say in some of the pre-builts, especially some of the passively cooled QNAPs from back in the day, those drives are two drives that died on me within a few years. Now with the build I have a Rosewill just server chassis, fans in the front that blow right onto the 15 drives. I haven't lost a single drive since I've started building with Unraid, right? And so I mean that's been a lot of years. The drives that have gone bad have been user error of maybe bumping them or dropping them when doing some fixes. But yeah, that temperature, it's one that you don't really think about, but makes a really big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Right on.
And it's so funny too. You mentioned drive size and like the different form factors you can get away with nowadays. It's wild with drive sizes for a home media box. You can get away with a 2, 3, or 4 drive system being more than enough storage. Like it's so much work for me now, but I started my system with 2 and 4 terabyte drives, and I don't need the 13 bay drive. I wish I could just consolidate. I'm going to do that project at some point and get like 3 drives and maybe move to a smaller chassis. But that's been a huge, I think, upgrade for most people, because most people's storage needs haven't changed too much, but the drive size will get you there a lot quicker.
Well, I mean, think about how insane it is, even from 5 years ago, where we said if we wanted to do 4 drives in RAID 5, the average drive size there, that was kind of the hot thing, was 3 terabytes. Okay, yep. 4 3 terabyte drives in RAID 5, 9 terabytes of effective storage. Or I could go pick up 2 10 terabyte drives in RAID 1, spend half the amount of drives, still have redundancy, put a little health notice on it, and guess what? I have 1 terabyte more effective storage, and I paid half the amount of money for that network share. It's like, okay, sounds good.
Exactly. And now you could almost start considering solid state for some of this stuff.
Yes.
For a lot of the storage, right?
Yeah, that's the big thing. I mean, especially on the Power Edge, you can still buy a 1U rack unit that gives you 8 2.5-inch enclosures. You can populate them with 10K SAS drives. You can populate them with SSDs, like whatever tickles your fancy. But there's a lot more configuration options and form factors that are in that price range now.
Yeah. And
go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was going to answer. So Bob asked a question, and I'll get Christian's thoughts on this. So he had a question: do you spin your hard drives down, or do you leave them on 24/7? I'll answer from my perspective. So on Unraid, I have 3 SSDs, 3 different cache pools, and obviously those stay on all the time. Those are where my app data for my Dockers and those are staying on. For my array with my drives, I do let them spin down, and that's primarily because a lot of my services don't, the way Unraid works, it's not RAID. So all those files, or the whole file, is stored on individual drives. So for Plex example, if I load a movie, it only needs to spin up, find the drive that has it, spin that drive up and play it. And Plex is my biggest use case for mine. So I don't need all the drives spinning all the time. When I was doing things like using Nextcloud or hosting a lot of files that are accessed all the time, it was better for me to keep them spinning because the time for it to spin up the drive, load times are a little bit longer. But when we're talking about just firing up a movie, I'm willing to wait the extra 2 seconds, 3 seconds for it to go spin that drive up and go. I've always had the question, though, and my question is more of, am I causing more wear and tear by spinning them up and spinning them down than just letting them run all the time? And also, with that being said, I do still sometimes throw in, like if I need a drive in a pinch, I will throw in a non-NAS drive, just kind of consumer grade desktop drive for that reason. So I don't know. That's how I do it. I do let them spin down, but that's my rationale for it. I don't think there's a probably end all be all answer. It probably really depends on how you're using your server.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the enterprise answer is always all drives on 24/7. There's really probably not a lot of use cases for spinning drives down if you're in a data center.
Right.
Outside of the data center, it's a little bit of a different story. I don't think that for example, if we were to compare failure rates of having poor ventilation to failure rates due to spin up, spin down, I think you'd find temperature 10-to-1 ratio because I spin drives up and down all the time. Good ventilation, keeping, dust and other electrostatic stuff out of the chassis, super important, especially for like the drive controller and potentially the disk controller. Platter density concerns me a little bit with spin up and spin down, like more moving parts, more potential things that can go wrong in a single drive at higher density. But I kind of have to ask myself, like, what is the use case? Do I want these drives to spin down because I want to save on electric? Okay. And then I have to play some games like, what's the additional annual cost for running these 24/7 to the increased risk of the drive failure? And so, like, if you're willing to hedge that bet and say, I have enough of these disks that I can handle like a 2-disk failure, and I'm comfortable rolling the dice on maybe I'm going to get more lucky with hard drive failures than I am with the additional electric cost. Like, to each his own. I don't feel like there is a canonical right answer for the home user in that respect. For me personally, I love stuff up 24/7 because I love alarming the hell out of it. So like, I want to know when a drive fails. Like, I want to know when a smart status says boo. I want to know when a server goes bump in the night. And there's just always that little fear gremlin when you walk over to someone's dusty rack and they're like, yeah, I had that on 6 months ago. It ran great. And you're like, uh-huh. So for me, my preference is just always on. I try to think about power efficiency more in terms of what I'm building, not in terms of runtime hours. For me, runtime hours is a calculus that is a little bit more diminishing returns.
That's a really good way. I've never actually asked myself the question, why do I need these to spin down? Like, electrical cost has always been the thing, but I've never calculated how much
so
that is
small
saving
though,
me.
Mike.
I know it's gotta be.
The hard drive is the most efficient power consumer in the whole box. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they require the least amount of energy. And then you think about, they're spinning. I mean, it's the old fluorescent light question. Sometimes it's just cheaper to leave the thing on because the startup is so expensive, right? So
Yes.
Imagine that happening over and over and over and over and over again throughout a day, and then multiply that by 365. Christian, do you have do you ever worry about, I mean, the recovery on a large density 10 terabyte 14 now is actually 14 is in the average guy's price range for, I mean, they're like $250, whatever. Do you get worried at all about that density failing and having then to support a recovery for that one drive that may have been spread out across a couple? I don't know. Do you think about that?
I get more worried that people think that the large one drive is their answer to storage and that, oh, I'll just buy this one drive and I'm set for life type thing.
I'll partition it so the back.
Yeah. And I guess the other piece of that from a data recovery perspective, it actually probably opens more opportunities for data recovery to be successful because let's say it's only one platter that has problems. They can probably make those other platters sing long enough to pull data off that drive. But yeah, general tenet is you're smushing more amount of moving parts in a equivalent size and in some cases smaller size space and expecting a stable outcome. And it's an engineering effort. It's obviously fairly battle tested stuff. When I think of recovery time though, like if we're building our systems right at home in the industry, et cetera, we should be thinking about like, okay, how long is it going to take me to rebuild a RAID or a NAS with these size drives? And I'm sorry, but like even if you build a NAS based off of hardware from 5 years ago with 10 or 14 terabyte drives of today, I don't think you're talking about a recovery time that is somehow wildly outside of like when a home user wants to be using the thing again. So no, I don't really worry about it. I think the progression is that we're still lying in wait for SSDs to be that high density alternative. And I think that's when, beyond a shadow of doubt, density will be no object, because you still have no moving parts. Yeah, you have more flash memory, but it's going to become kind of more throwaway to have flash fail. It's also much more predictable when your flash is going to fail, because it's much you can measure wear on an SSD much more accurately than you can measure wear on moving parts. So you can plan for it better, and these systems can engineer their notifications for it better. And then eventually we're going to move to what you're saying, our SSDs caching my Plex server is going to be my DDR5 RAM array is caching my SSDs. Like, that's where we're headed. So no, I don't worry about it. I think we'll be here for probably another 5 to 10 years where these 20 terabyte spinners are the cool thing. And by then we'll be talking about 4 to 8 terabyte SSDs as mainstream. And then it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you go, pick up a couple $100 powered server that has 8 2.5-inch SAS bays, throw in a bunch of those 4 terabyte SSDs, and build like a nice little RAID 50 NAS? It'd be sweet. So I don't know. I don't worry about these things.
Couple comments coming out of chat. Of course, Backblaze does a nice job of publishing their drive failure rates, what's failing and where. So if you're kind of wondering, I mean, we're really just down to a couple hard drive companies. So you can, it's pretty easy in that to get some numbers to get comfortable with that. Michael is asking, are Iron Wolf drives any better than the other drives? And I guess I'll throw that out both to you guys. The hard drive manufacturers have all rebranded their drives over the last couple of years in this marketing trickery of sort. Christian, any thoughts on, as we think about the different, enterprise grade, or and I want to let me, before I forget, I want to ask you some questions too. From a hard drive spinning speed perspective, from a data center, is it better to get the cooler, slower spinning drives running full time than to have the higher speed drives that may have more heat? So 2 questions there for you. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll speak to the data center use case first, because I think about it a lot more often. With data center, it is a race to the bottom for density. So if you think about just physical dimensions of, I'm going to dig dirt, put walls around, I'm going to pay for power and cooling and generators and HVAC systems, and then I'm going to plan out my data center to have X number of rack positions dedicated for storage. If you think about, we were going to go build this data center we're theoretically talking about 8 years ago, we'd be wheeling in 42U or 48U rack size storage clusters that are 2 terabyte disks. And so now we can wheel in 20 terabytes. Hands down, any day of the week, I'm going to pick the highest density drive, even if I have to deal with higher failure rates, because then the power costs that you're paying are astronomically more of an issue than higher drive fault rates. So from that perspective, I would always bias in a large enterprise deployment, take the higher drive fault rates, because the density in a single data center building is just going to be so much better what you can do today. Outside of that, looking more at home, again, we're really talking about drive performance ratings. So it's like, okay, you have the Iron Wolf, you have all these different series. You could go up to enterprise SAS drives, and all it really comes down to is 2 things. One, like, what is the rated read writes per year you're going to get out of this drive for how many years? And 2 is like, what is the expected speed or performance you're going to get of that drive in the average case? And so I again tend to bias a little bit towards, 1, home doesn't care about top end speeds for spinners. Okay. 2, we care a little bit more about fault rates of drives, because we don't feel like, having to, deal with NASs like 24/7. We like to play with other things like home theaters and media servers and what have you. So, again, like if your wallet is singing to you that money is no object, like go get the higher rated thing. If you want to build something on a budget, again, these days your dice roll is probably pretty good. That, like let's just say even within the Iron Wolf, there's two models. Do you want the Iron Wolf or do you want the Iron Wolf Pro? And chances are Iron Wolf Pro at 10 terabytes versus standard Iron Wolf, number one, you're talking a difference of like $40. So like not a huge like dice roll if you want to get the higher rated drives that can handle the 24/7. But even without that, again, I only think you get super hung up in branding of drives or classes of drives if you're trying to build towards a specific use case. If you're building towards general use case, cling dearly and closely to just a bunch of disks, right? I'm just going to go buy a bunch of disks on the shelf. The specs to me are somewhat irrelevant. I'm going to put them in a cool environment that has good airflow. I'm going to put some decent operating system on it that is not going to corrupt my data. Like, probably don't use Windows storage spaces because it's just, they're never going to get it right. Probably use like an Unraid or, something that's community supported, and like have fun with it. Like, don't overthink it.
Everything Christian said, completely agree. I think the one thing too is, a lot of the marketing and a lot of the difference as you start to go up to enterprise drives is drives that are engineered to be very close together in very large amounts, right? They deal with vibration a little bit better. And usually in the home environment, it's not a huge issue. So from that perspective, don't need to spend any more money. I completely agree with Christian. Just, get a bunch of discs. I've had really good luck with Western Digital, right? But I also have Seagate. If you would look at my Unraid machine, there's a mixture of all of them, mixture of sizes. What I will say though is just whatever OS you choose, get very comfortable with and practice and know the process for replacing a drive when it goes bad. Because I think really when it comes down to it, it's the stress of if this go bad, man, what's this going to take? How much time? But if you've done it before, you know it. Like for me, if a drive goes down in Unraid, it doesn't bother me at all because the process is so simple. I've done it before. You swap it out. Unraid, emulates that data until you can get a new drive in there. And I put one in, and so it's not a big pain for me. But before I knew how to do it and before I had been forced to do it, it was more stressful. So I think just know your system, know your recovery. I think a lot of us, we talk about this a lot with backup, right? We do all the backup and then it comes to, well, how are you actually going to recover that? Like, where are you going to pull from? How are you going to get that implemented?
Do you know how to do it?
Do you know how to do it? Like all your stuff's on Backblaze. Okay. Yeah. But when your Unraid system goes down, if you needed to slurp all that back in, do you know how you're going to do it? So I would just know those different methods of what you're going to do.
It's a super salient point because, some of the clients that I've worked with through Maplegrove, their firms, get audited, and they require, increasingly auditors require that the organization prove that they have a comprehensive IT disaster recovery plan. And these are for organizations that like technology is a means to an end, right? It's not their business or their bread and butter. And it's absolutely spot on how many things start to fall out as you write that document for clients that like, oh yeah, there's this thing and there's this thing. And yeah, like how would you get that person in here to service this equipment? And like, if it catches on fire tomorrow, like what are you going to replace it with? And yeah, super salient exercise. One of the things that makes me sad as a technology enthusiast, both in the home and in the enterprise, is that it's just getting so hard to beat. For $10 a month, you go get 100 terabytes of cloud storage somewhere and like all these problems go away for you. But what fun would that be, right? So like from a pricing perspective, like you're never going to beat the price of just go buy, like, even if you spent like 30 or $50 a month on cloud storage, like you'll probably never be able to beat that in home anymore, building it yourself. That's just the economy of scale that we're in. And that said, one of the things about that is, well, guess what? You have a great disaster recovery plan. It's called The Provider's Taking Care of It For You. Have a nice day. But anything outside of that, like it goes back to some of the fundamental things we talk about in home tech. Like I still can't tell you how many people don't have a plan to back up, restore their Windows machine. Oh, it's somewhere in Carbonite, but oh, Carbonite doesn't really do bare metal backups anymore. So like, oh, like all my apps, yeah, those weren't backed up. I have like my document storage, and like these are real world customer testimonies that I've dealt with in the last 6 months where it's like, oh boy. And quite honestly, it's shocking to me that, here we are in 2022 and Microsoft has Windows 11, the next big thing. And it's still like, oh yeah, like use that Windows 7 backup and restore tool in the control panel that we're deleting if you want that bare metal system backup image, wink, wink, because they're trying to move you towards, if your box has a problem with it, do the reset, do the auto repair. Like pretty much we're moving towards, the industry is moving towards the direction where operating system configurations for the home user really don't matter to providers anymore. It's like your data, your documents, your videos, your pictures, your music. We're going to give you 20 different ways to back that up. But backing up your operating system and your applications, like that's an area that's still lagging, not for lack of ability to do it, but because the industry is specifically moving people towards, if your device has something weird with the OS, just reinstall the OS. Like don't bother yourself with that multi-month or super saga on the 1-800 number to get a healthy operating system back.
Well, and we're moving in this area of mobile where, I mean, so few people are on PCs anymore, just to be honest. It's their phones, and those operating systems were written in a way to be back fast, to be disposable, to be, to your point, it's your data. I care so little about my data anymore. I mean, yeah, pictures, but that's kind of like pictures are really the last bastion of, I've got stuff other places and spread out, and I can reconstruct it if I need to. Now I'm not the typical, I'm not the typical user. Christian, if one day you said, if you called me, you're like, yeah, all your audio is gone. Well, okay. I mean, I think I have it all backed up somewhere. I'm pretty sure I've got a Backblaze backup of all the audio that I've created, but have I checked that? Do I really know? Is everything there? Kind of deal. Does it, at the end of the day, the question is, does it matter? On some of this stuff, does it matter?
Yeah. I mean, it matters as much as you want it to matter. I think
that's my point. Yeah, that's my point. It matters for some people. That's a big important. They can't, and we all have that kind of data where we're like, I'll recreate it. And then we have like, I got those pictures with that audio or whatever, those movies.
Well, and that's actually, that's becoming more of the challenge, I think, is not where do I store it? How do I store it? How do I configure it? But how do I retrieve, organize, and understand it? Yeah. Because now we have the ability to,
where did I put it?
Yeah. Now we have the ability to be like those horrible, IT horror shows where you get the laptop from someone to fix and their desktop is just littered with icons left to right as their background. It's like that on fire with people's data, because now storage is no object. Data rates is no object. And so it's like stuff. I don't have to worry about deleting, cleaning, going through, yet alone, finding it. I'm going to talk to Cortana, and Cortana is going to, reach into the depths of her search index and pull something out that I need. But even myself included, like increasingly, it's more questions about what are the tools to effectively manage and curate that data, tag, index, sort it, face tag people, that kind of discussion. I think we don't have enough, because the discussion for so long has been just how do I get the data into a place where I'm not going to lose it and I can get to it, but not what do I do within it.
And I think this new system, Christian, you summarized it really well, of kind of like where the industry has gone, right? Where it's protecting your data and it's everywhere. In an instance where with hardware failure, computer failure, whatever you want to call it, this new system almost favors the techie guy compared to the average user. What I mean by that is if my computer, if my OS were to get completely corrupted, I actually don't do bare metal backups. I don't back up the hard drive. Because all of my data, to your point, that I care about is saved off site. And then I use it as an opportunity. Hey, the few apps that I use, I know exactly where to go to get those. I know my logins for those accounts. I use I have very organized, Adobe Cloud, all these things where I can go grab that. That is quicker for me than actually going out, finding my restore, reflash in the drive. Whereas the non-techie average user, if their computer goes down, they don't know where all those apps are. They don't even remember their logins to their Adobe Cloud, and they've never gone back and re-downloaded stuff. And they don't even know what app it was they were using to do X, Y, and Z task. And I think that is actually more detrimental to the average person on hard drive failure than it is the techie-driven person. It was almost like they would benefit more from being able to have that, the Windows 7 restore, kind of go back to an old version type of backup.
Well,
because I think of all my family who call me, and I just know if one of them today were to have a failure, and the backup, it's no longer, oh yeah, I'm backing up to an external drive, creating a clone. It's just, oh yeah, and the best that would make of the apps would be more time than anything.
They don't. A lot of times they don't have a clue. We're back every time, Christian. We go back to the home server show topics that we used to talk about all the time. It's a different. I mean, and I think even in the enterprise, we're moving to less and less of a footprint on the desktop, and it's just becoming. There's so much web app usage, and I mean, I think actually people get more disgruntled when they lose their shortcuts than when they actually lose hardware. Because it's like, hey, I'm going to log in, the system's going to push my configuration to me, but I got to have my shortcuts. Like, I don't know where anything's at. I go up and pull it down, and I don't know where that website is. I can't type that in. So it's another, I mean, that's a whole nother area of data dependency is the hardware isn't, I mean, we can quickly replace that. It's the functionality of being able to do the processes that are associated with that role and how they, the browser is more important than it's ever been. That's actually an operating system in a lot of ways. If I can't get to it from the browser, I'm kind of screwed. Christian, speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about network infrastructure, because I think, you're seeing a lot of that in what you do. I have Cox Communication here, and I've been a little disgruntled with them over the last year. Never before have I been as disappointed kind of with their service. And I've been toying with the idea of actually going to 5G. So T-Mobile offers kind of home 5G, and I've been kind of messing with it. We've been toying and talking about IPv6. That doesn't ever seem like it's ever going to come, but it's going to have to, I think, at some point. So give us the Christian Johnson, 5-10 minute version of where do we stand from an infrastructure standpoint? Where are things going? We'll do a little mini Cyber Frontiers episode here, and you can kind of school us on what you're seeing ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 2022 is probably one of the biggest years for consumer network access. And there's a couple things driving that. Number one, in the 8 to 10 year ago time frame, a lot of these foundational technologies were getting laid out from like bare bones, like spec to implementation, IPv6 being, one of them. We always talked about, well, how fast is that adoption going to happen? It's obviously been slower than even most people expected. We're up to around 38% or so today, which honestly not bad. I think we're going to see another hockey stick take that up to probably over 50% in the next 2 years. That's my guess anyway. But I'm just going to kind of walk through kind of some of the technology evolutions and then why that has all kind of hit ahead on 2022 being a big year for the home, and for just network-based things in general. So first you have IPv6, and the problem that people were trying to solve was, well, we're out of IPv4 addresses, but it actually did something much more important that we talked about on Cyber Frontiers, which is it gave way to Internet of Things being a reality and a possibility in a way that it couldn't have been prior, where each device has a unique address that is not being interpreted by something called network address translation, which was purely built for the purpose of dealing with public to private handling of data. I think a lot of people in their mental model thought, oh, I need this thing called NAT because I need to protect my home devices from being out there on the internet. And so NAT in most people's mind became synonymous with firewall. And that's a huge no. NAT more or less is just this huge overhead that sucks tons of power generators in the world to just run the NAT protocol in that part of the TCP stack. And it's inefficient, right? So if for nothing else, you want to know why IPv6 is exciting, internet is notionally faster, more robust, less congested because you're not running NAT. And it's not just about you as the consumer running NAT, it's about all of these destinations that you're going out to, right? So if you're trying to talk to, the nearest CDN that's going to give you a Netflix stream, for example, right? You're still several hops away. Maybe that's going through a proxy or reverse proxy. Maybe you're hitting a web service that is 20 hops away from where your home is. And how many of those intermediary services are performing BGP peering as well as network address translation to the ports that you're trying to talk to? So getting to IPv6 is very foundational for the start of the Internet of Things, because each device, whether it's a refrigerator or an enterprise data center server, has its own address. The IPv6, it's 64 bits, typically just default model here. First 64 bits public prefix, second 64 bits private prefix, and this gives you, more permutations of addresses that you ever want to have to think about to account for all your devices. So that was kind of like the second foundational thing. Was we had IPv6, no one really knew how to use it, yet alone deploy it. Then Internet of Things kind of came along a couple years later. Both have had their growing pains. Both have been they've hit their hype curve on the Gartner chart. Now we're starting to see the growth maturity curve. It's kind of exciting.
So I have a question about IPv6. Do you think, because I am the bozo you were referring to, that in my mind, as I have learned network as a lay person, this isn't my day job, right? I only know how to secure my network and divvy up VLANs and everything using NAT. Right. Like in my mind, when I'm trying to block IP addresses, when I'm doing all of that, that is my sense of security. And so the reason I have not implemented IPv6 is because I have no idea how to do all of that. So has that been the root cause of a lot of lack of adoption? Like we talked about, you had mentioned 38%. Is the rest of that due to just the industry catching up to getting away from that thought, or is there other factors at play on the adoption rate?
Now, honestly, home users play, I would say, the least role in adoption of IPv6, as weird as that sounds. The number of years it's taken for both governments and industry to engineer and architect their IPv6 networks to scale correctly, handle the correct way of doing security, handle peering. Notionally in your head, it's like, oh, it's just a bigger address. But no, like, the actual protocol space at layer 2, layer 3 has changed with IPv6. And so as industries have come online to bringing those networks up, these numbers are adopting because consumers are eventually at the end destination. The turnkey example of this is cell phone networks, right? So there's a big increase in IPv6 adoption because all of your cell phones probably are getting IPv6 addresses, not IPv4. And so, like, you didn't have to do anything. You bought that iPhone and turned it on to Verizon or T-Mobile, and guess what? Now you're an IPv6 user. And you probably have no idea unless you go to your iPhone or Android settings and say, what is the IP address that my cell tower is giving me, right? And so as these carriers and network providers, both in the home space and the enterprise space, really start to come up to speed with those networks and they become more commonplace, the home users are just going to sadly be along for the ride. And that's probably a good thing, right? So, and I will talk a little bit about how that's going to get even more exciting for fiber to the home here shortly, but it's a short way of saying no. I mean, the industry, it's pretty well understood. There's been a lot of concerns around backwards compatibility between 4 and 6. And so that's accounted for a fair amount of time. Like, we're going to run these dual stacks because we know there's going to be legacy devices and services that'll talk IPv4 for years after 6 is mainstream. So that's I would say, a much larger piece of it. By the time
Okay.
it's, you playing around with your pfSense box at home and wondering what the hell I'm doing, guess what? You're again kind of waiting, well, gee, is my ISP actually giving me an IPv6 address? And it's like, oh, they are. Cool. So then, yeah, from that time, now it's on you, Mike, to figure out, like, do you want to turn on IPv6 in your home? Like, are you going to set up your gateway to do that correctly? But that usually is I think that's going to be towards the tail end of IPv6 adoption, not the primary source.
Yeah, because in my head, I turn on IPv6, and now every device in my home has a direct access to the internet and can be accessed. I know that's, I have to learn the security around it. So I think from a home user, I think, John brought up a good point. I think whoever said it in the chat that, for a home user, it's probably not as prevalent and not as necessary, right, for us to adopt. It probably will be, and you're right. We'll probably be along for the ride. I'm not ready for that ride. I'm just not ready for that ride yet. I have a lot of Googling to do.
Yeah. And I mean, John brings up a great point. It's like, well, how has the security model changed between 4 and 6? And it's like, yes, host-based security is always a great thing. Like Defense in Depth says, we secure our devices on the network as much as we secure the network itself. And we place zero trust in saying that a device on the network has some level of trust, like prove it. But the networks themselves can defend these devices in much the same way. So like my pfSense edge device at home, it's not going to be a NAT rule. You're going to be enabling an allow or a block firewall rule, and it's going to sit on an interface that's filtering IPv6 packets between your WAN interface and your local area network, right? So like all those things are still there. It's just the mechanisms by which people think about it. Like when you go and create a NAT rule in pfSense, like behind the scenes, it's automatically creating for you that firewall rule and entry to allow that traffic to flow. And you're like, oh, no, this is a NAT rule. Well, no, it's a NAT rule, but it's also a firewall rule. And there's both. In fact, you can go delete the firewall underlying rule entry and break your NAT entry by unlinking them and have one
done that
together. Yeah,
you're
exactly.
Right. Yeah, when they're not anchored, I need a little anchor symbol, right, to tell me they're tied together.
Yeah, so like the simple mental model is to think, well, gee, that whole NAT part of the screen goes away, but I'm still going to have these firewall tables where I can filter traffic coming in and out. I can filter protocols coming in and out. I can filter source ranges. And with IPv6, it's going to be a little bit of a different art form, right? That first 64 bits of the address is really the equivalent of what's your public IPv4. So today we think of it as a single IPv4 address comes to your house, and then you have all your devices on your local area network, and they all shoot out that device or get port forwarded to a device behind the gateway. With IPv6, it's more like, no, each of the providers are going to give you what's called a prefix delegation. That prefix delegation is like at n size. And if you actually look at each bit that makes up that prefix delegation, it gets more and more specific. So it's like the world, this ASN, like Verizon, Jim's house. And then like Jim's house is like a /56 bit address, which means like Jim has like, thousands of IPv6 addresses for his home. And that prefix is always going to be the first 56 bits of any IPv6 device sitting in Jim's house. And the remaining bits that make up the 128 bits of IPv6, that's going to be your unique address for my phone or for my smart TV or for my fridge. So it more than solves the addressing problem. It still allows you to have kind of conventional security, but there's more things in the enterprise that have to be thought about for securing protocol layer, peering layer, et cetera. And there's also just what I call, there's a lot more IP fabrics, right? So like with IPv4, it's like we thought of things as address classes. So you had, C class addresses with a particular subnet size, and that meant something to a network engineer. Now with IPv6, it's like we have unicast and multicast in addition to broadcast, which is IPv4. So a lot more different ways to skin the cat for how IPv6 devices can talk directly to each other locally, how IPv6 devices can broadcast messages to the world, both locally and out to the internet. So there's a lot more ways of doing things with IPv6 that IPv4 didn't necessarily afford.
Got it.
Christian Joe's asking, is there a geo IP system for IPv6? Like, he says, that's how I keep my Chinese devices from phoning home.
Yeah, I haven't dug as in depth with that yet, but I believe it traces back to the concept of the prefix, right? So these prefixes are being handed out, like the organizations get their list of prefixes, which I believe go back to the Internet Registry, and that's gonna map to geo context. So it's not like you're gonna have an adjacent IPv6 address where N is in the US and N+1 is in China. So I can't elucidate with the clarity I would have liked to on that question, but it's going to basically come down to, instead of blocking IPv4 CIDR blocks that represent like China as a country, it's going to be, I'm blocking prefix lists, which are, one prefix list represents, potentially millions of addresses, right?
I'm just hoping all this ends up making as much sense to me one day as IP. Like I understand IPv4 and I understand how it all works, and I'm hoping one day that's just like it'll click. But everything you said, it's like, oh man, that's just a lot of work.
But Mike, remember when you were first learning, 4, and you're like, okay, how does this work, and what's a subnet, and why did it, and then all of a sudden you use it for a while and you're like, oh, okay, this kind of makes sense. You kind of understand how to read the map. You get the language. For my A+ or for my N+ certification, we needed to study all that. And that was one of those kinds of things at first you kind of go, what? And then you use it and you're like, oh, the layers make sense. I think, a lot of work and effort and brain power has gone into 6. And I think eventually when it matters to us, when we get to that point, we're like, okay, we're going to really need to, there's these devices that only are going to work on IPv6. We are going to need to understand this and take advantage of it. Right. And so I think there's some, Christian, it's just, we've been talking about this forever. Like, it just feels like,
But the exciting thing is, while we've been talking about it forever,
it's been happening.
2022 is going to be the year where I think a lot of these fruits start to pay off. So number one, with IPv6 increasingly rolling out, in fact, Verizon Fios finally, which has been one of the longest poles in the tent for consumers getting IPv6, they're rolling it out to their business and residential customers this year. They started deployments on January 9th, which is really exciting. It's coming out to more and more folks. So as a diehard Fios fan, awesome news for myself and the other 10 million people on the network. 2, you're seeing 5G ISP stuff just come out of the woodwork at really great prices, really great data rates, no data caps, and fairly good availability. I can't underscore, a big part of that is because of how much has gone into IPv6 and the mundane kind of plumbing. And then just the evolution of FCC spectrum combined with going from 4G to 5G, et cetera. They're talking about 6G now already, right? But for all intents and purposes, like 5G is going to continue to grow as this main mechanism, where a decade ago, we thought the big thing was we got to get every home in America to have fiber to the home. Now, if I was given a menu of options, I'm going to buy fiber to the home every time I can get it, because it's lowest latency. It does a lot of exciting things. But like, the reality is that if I'm out in the Midwest and there's, I'm 100 miles from the nearest fiber node, like, sorry, like fiber to the home is like a nice word that I read in the news now and then. And I think, if only I didn't have these coax cables out at my house, right? So 5G is really, I think, going to bridge a lot of those customers in a way that just wasn't affordable, realistic, or accessible before. And it's going to have a domino effect of Cox and Spectrum and these other providers who have really sucked people dry on the dead technology of these coax-based internets with the data caps and the crappy networks. Like, they're going to lose customers in volume when people wake up and go, oh, so you mean to tell me I pay for cell phones and you're going to give me like a 25% discount that, like, for an extra $50 a month, you're going to put this router and modem in my home that streams 5G, gives me faster symmetric bandwidth than coax at a lower price, and it's more reliable. Where do I sign? And many of them are doing it without contracts. So it totally blows up the mental model of the Coxes and the Spectrums having that core base of customers that they've been able to keep merely because there was no better option on the market.
Yeah. No other option.
Right.
In a
right.
lot of cases, right?
So it's
Christian, you're going to determine right now, because I've been thinking like, so T-Mobile, I can get to 5G. I get almost better speeds than I'm getting on my Gigablast at half the price.
Yeah.
Works well. I'm on that same network here. So it's not like I'm going to get surprised. I know it works in this area from the shed. This is what I used to stream from the shed, as I just put my phone up in the corner and put it on mobile hotspot. It works great, right? As long as I don't have the VPN turned on. And then so should I at half the price if you're my technology advisor?
Absolutely. Because Gigablast is like, okay, what? You get think about how crazy it is, the market that we've built. You get Gigablast, which is Cox's amazing branding for we're going to help you get to your data cap faster. That's what that plan translates to.
You're right.
You could give me 10 gig, but if it's a data cap, well, who cares, right? So
and 35 meg up.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Like that's my biggest complaint about it is data cap, 35 meg up. It's awful.
For the average home person who, by the way, probably really doesn't know what to do with gigabit to begin with, I would take symmetric half gig at half the cost, hands down, over a coax based Gigablast service with a data cap. Like there's just no comparison.
I take 250 or 200 symmetric, right? Like, agreed. Completely agree.
Joe mentions, he goes, if you're going T-Mobile home internet, I'd wait for the new modem. They've had issues with the trash can overheating. And I imagine that's something you're going to have to kind of watch and keep track of.
And Joseph's actually preempting my part 2 of this, right? So we have the network upgrades, we have the address upgrades, we have the infrastructure upgrades. That's lended way for this wave of 5G deployments, which is going to be the death in the coffin of coax-based ISPs. Now you have this 3 things left. The first, to address Joe's point, all of the ISPs, Verizon, I've been looking at in particular, like they're really innovative companies. We'll just use Verizon as kind of the example because, quite frankly, I can't think of a better residential internet provider. Their JD Power consistently rates them number 1 every year. They are the classic example of a company that had a choice to make. Choice 1 was, I don't think any of the executives at Verizon really understood how long the return on investment was going to be for fiber to the home, because it's expensive to deploy this stuff. Like they spent billions of dollars building that infrastructure out, and getting that revenue and return on investment to be profitable in fiber to the home, it's a much longer time horizon than the average guy would think. Combine that with 5G, where it's like they've kind of already done all that. Fiber to the home is really just fiber is now enabling these 5G towers. The cost per consumer to get on a high-speed network is going to be way lower for Verizon. But they have a choice to make. Like we have all these subscribers on fiber to the home. Fiber to the home is still, I call it the gold standard. So, symmetric, true fiber optic, no coax, no, nonsense. We could get into what types of fiber optic networks they're using. GPON is currently the standard for Verizon. It's a passive optical network. They're getting ready to move to XGPON 2, which is a little bit different. And basically you can think of it, one cable on the street splits out light into n number of homes that's going to ride that single fiber cable to what they call the central office or the optical line termination point. And you can't beat that in terms of residential cost to have a true fiber connection. But again, coming back to this whole thing, Verizon has this choice to make. They have invested this huge network for fiber. It's not going away. They've also invested in this huge 5G network deployment. How do they bridge the gap for their residential customers when they're trying to market both options? The brilliance in what they did was they said one ONT and one router device to rule them all. So first off, Verizon split their ONT from their modem and router a long time ago. Then secondly, what they released in the last year, the 5G router that you buy if you go buy the Verizon 5G internet plan is now the same router that they install in a new Fios residential customer's home if they're using Verizon Fios. So now it doesn't really matter what the input source is. I could be a 5G customer or I could be a Fios customer. I have that same router form factor. In addition to that, that router now has new features that are driving what I call the spectrum of broadband within the home. So Wi-Fi 6E is really taking off. It's a Wi-Fi 6 in general, with both the FCC opening that spectrum, and you're seeing a whole new generation of routers come out. Now Verizon's kind of combining all of that. You get a Wi-Fi 6 router. It can take in a 5G signal. It can take in a fiber to the home signal. And so all of these providers and carriers are going to focus on building the best router that they can bundle for you with a plan and produce en masse. And then in addition to that, these routers, used to be the gold standard to have gigabit ports on the back. Well, now if you go look at that latest Verizon router, the CR 3100, I think it's a model number that's barely out there yet. It has a 10 gigabit WAN port on the back. For its LAN ports, it has 2.5 gigabit LAN ports. And these are, the same commodity device that used to be the crappy Westel or the crappy Action Tech. Like, that's the device we're now talking about a decade later. Is we're putting this single box in your home that can do 5G, fiber to the home, and inside the house, guess what? With Wi-Fi 6E, you can get multi-gig speeds to your devices. You have multi-gig over 2.5 gig LAN ports, which are coming on all the newer motherboards, and you have a WAN port that can handle up to 10 gig. Holy cow. Now you've seen the convergence of IPv6, fiber to the home, 5G, the FCC's opening of broadband for 5G and the 6 gigahertz spectrum, the Wi-Fi 6 802.11ax spectrum, and you have like 6 or 7 major different network and broadband technologies all in one box. And it's coming to consumers en masse. So 2022 is a big year for IPv6 adoption because this stuff's going to roll out everywhere. So as Jim and Mike and everyone decides that Gigablast is a thing of the past, they're going to be migrating themselves to IPv6 because they're going to get themselves on a 5G network. So that adoption is going to take care of itself when Cox has to kill off their coax network and find a new business. To make it super exciting, the icing on the cake for the enthusiasts like myself is that, well, wait a second. You just told me that there is a 10 gigabit WAN port on the back of the device. Why is that? Well, it's because in 2022, Verizon's going to announce, they haven't done it formally yet. You can read the interwebs of DSL reports and Reddit, if you will. But Verizon's going to go to what I call Gigabit Connection 2.0. They're going to release symmetric 2 gigabits per second. You might think that's revolutionary, but they're under pressure from AT&T, which is offering up to 5,000 or 5 gigabits per second symmetric. They're under pressure from Google Fiber, which is 2 down, 1 up. They're under pressure from Comcast Gigabit Pro, a very little known service that's run by their Metro E team that doesn't use the coax connection, but is actually a fiber to the home solution that's symmetric 3 gigabits per second. And so you're going to see all the fiber to the home providers continuing to drive that edge of what's possible for the home enthusiast by moving people into 10 gig standards. And you're going to see it both in 10 gig Ethernet deployments with the copper cable, Cat6 or Cat6A standard. You're also going to see it in some instances with multi-mode fiber. So you're going to get a multi-mode 850 nanometer thing. You're going to plug it into a Juniper router, and you're going to be running fiber. It's crazy, like multi-mode fiber in the house. Like everyone thinks, oh my gosh, that's a data center thing. What are you talking about? What are these SFPs? And you probably won't see that in most of the deployments. Gigabit Pro is a fairly rare exception that does that. But the point is that fiber to the home is going to continue to drive those standards for the highest end thing you can get. And it's going to keep the routers and the 5G and eventually the 6G all in lockstep with those foundational technologies, where the consumer is going to have just this explosion of possibilities for what type of internet, what type of bandwidth, what type of connectivity based services they want to consume in their life. And we haven't even talked about the revolution going on in satellite-based internet and Starlink and these other things that are going to be surprises. So the ecosystem and the competition for internet-based services is turning up to like 1,000%. It's probably one of the most exciting topics that's under talked about in consumer shows right now, is that 2022 is a huge year for network broadband. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to be pleasantly surprised when you can get access to all these services. And you're going to be like, well, wait a second. No one told me or gave me a heads up. I mean, it's crazy. Like, I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about it in a very like average guy way, but the fact that that level of capability is coming at these price points we're talking about and at this level of accessibility, it's kind of one of the dreams that we've talked about on this show for a long time. So it's no longer like, oh yeah, Christian in Buffalo, New York, when he had his Fios, was like the only guy who could get it because New York was one of the first deployment places. Like, no, we're talking like all 50 states are going to have major options for internet. And really, it's quite frankly, it's about time, because if you look at some of the other places in Korea and Brazil, they're way ahead in their IPv6. Everyone's got 10 gig fiber going to their home. Like, it's interesting that it's taken us kind of longer to figure out all the jigsaw infrastructure pieces of the US based internet. But I think we're finally, like, 2022 is going to be a big year. So I'm excited about it.
When you're first, you have legacy, and we've had a lot of legacy to unwind in that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes that's the curse of being first.
It is,
right?
Yeah.
Is you build. I mean, this has been Windows' problem, is they were the curse of being first, and they have all this legacy they got to unwind. And so I'm ready
like
to
flying a Boeing and trying to swap out the engines mid-flight, right? Because like you're in flight, you're going. It's like, oh shoot, now we're trying to swap all this out, but we need to keep everything running. But you had me so excited. I just signed up for notifications when Verizon 5G home service would be available for me. Because the price is $50 a month. Yeah. I'm paying $140 to Cox just for internet.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, I'm at 100 and some change, Mike, and T-Mobile's 50. Right, they're to what Christian said. Right, they have no problem coming in and cutting this low price just because the infrastructure, they're not having to lay cable, right, and so they're not having to support that piece. And there's towers, but I think the economies are just better, when we think about it from that perspective. So I'm going to give it a try. This has been on my mind for a while. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go.
You bring it up almost every episode. It's been,
I don't know if I want to switch over. The pain, if it doesn't work, I got to go crawling back to Cox, but I'm going to give it a shot.
Is there any issue with like carrier grade NAT issues and not being able to port forward or anything with any of these T-Mobiles, Verizons, or can you still host stuff behind or are we going to have to switch to IPv6 if we want to do any of that hosting?
Yeah, that's going to be one of the interesting things. Fiber to the home is still by far the best for hosting.
Right.
With most of the cellular based 5G based internet, I expect it's going to be more nuanced at first. It is not quite clear what the dual stack approach is for 5G when it's not your cell phone and it's, it's coming into your house. So it is probably a much higher bar there in that respect. But a lot of people say, well, NAT's a big limitation to getting back in, and that's certainly true for many of the implementations. But I will say, where there's a will, there's a way. There's a lot of reverse proxying and other types of capabilities that you can do to kind of reverse tunnel in the world where CG NATs are in place. So might not be the conventional type of hosting you're used to thinking, where it's like an IP and it hits a firewall and you get access to your services. But there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Right. Because I use a reverse proxy now. Everything goes to 443, and that reverse proxy splits that all out into the different, hosting things. And that's just one thing I know in even in Lincoln, there is a Nebraska, there's a host provider, and they are by far best speeds, lowest price, but again, it's carrier grade NAT. And so a lot of the people who are trying to do a lot of things like, oh man, it's a double NAT, and they run into all those sort of issues. So interesting. We'll see how that deployment goes, and I'll let someone else be the guinea pig, and then start writing up really good blog posts on how to accomplish that goal.
Yeah, for sure.
I've even thought about ordering the service and running 2 for a while, like bring it in, set it up, connect some of my devices to,
and then set up a PF Sense box and a failover, right?
To really both, cool. So that I've got, I can kind of run them side by side, and then jettison, for a month. I mean, it gives you a month to try it out. It's $50 extra. Why wouldn't I? So I get that figured out tonight and get that taken care of tomorrow and get that rolling. Christian, like always, the time flies. We'll have to have you back. I know you're building a pretty nice home theater setup, and that may be a whole conversation on its own. So we'll get you back. And how far along are you in the process of building out this home theater? Is it done? Is it 50% done? Are you still planning it? Where are you at with the process?
I'm about at the 70 to 80% point. So I have most of the hardware at this point. I'm still kind of working on the space, some of the wiring, some of the wall outlets, and kind of cleaning it up. But the big pieces are in, and I've started having a lot of fun with it. So
okay. Well, we'll get behind the scenes. You and I will figure out a quick date to get you back on, and then spend some time talking about the home theater setup and what you're doing with that. Are you doing it? Do you feel like are you bleeding edge, cutting edge, average consumer? Where do you think you're at?
That's an interesting question. I would say in the world of like hi-fi audiophile type stuff, I'm probably more on the mid spectrum, but in terms of the average consumer, it's fairly new stuff. But we're talking like probably the oldest technology in the build is the speakers themselves, which have been around for 3 years now. But I've had a lot of fun trying to get the high-end effect for the mid-range price. So not really looking to spend like what I call the Looney Tunes money that so I've quickly learned in my dabbling in home theater, which by no means I find myself an expert. I'm learning on the fly. Home theaters are bottomless pits for your wallet, and they are bottomless pits for your time. And they are also bottomless pits for either earning or not earning favor with your wife, depending on how much time is going to your home theater versus your wife's ability to enjoy your home theater. So there's all these trade-offs to balance, but by and large, it's a fairly modern build, and I'm having a lot of fun just kind of tweaking and getting into the world of hi-fi itself, which we could go in a whole nother discussion about. It's great to build the latest and greatest home theater, but if you can't get services that give you high fidelity content, it's a whole nother matter. So certainly most of the big video streamers have a lot of Dolby Atmos content, which is quite frankly a game changer if you're just used to the standard 4K UHD. It's a step up to really have the average amount of content you watch be in Atmos. But music streaming services, like, holy cow, like I want to crank services in lossless CD quality. And it's like, there's like 2 providers that do it that are mainstream, and they don't do it on the apps and the hardware that are in the home theater. And so it's on their kind of vendory devices. And so
Thanks, Apple.
Yeah, no, they're a classic example. Like they just released the Apple Music app for the LG WebOS platform, which is like a huge deal. Yeah, we released everything, but oh yeah, that Dolby Atmos hi-fi spatial audio thing that we do for our Apple hardware, yeah, that's not in the LG WebOS app. So it's like, oh yeah, great guys, thanks so much. But if you buy that, that little Apple TV puck and you put HDMI with eARC, yeah, we'll make sure that lossless spatial audio works just great for you. So, those kind of things you're learning about as you kind of do it. And that, of course, continues to feed the bottomless pit wallet that's required to do this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, they hold you hostage for sure. Yeah. So, well, okay, don't give it all away.
I'm sorry.
That's we're considering that a teaser, a trailer. That's the trailer for the next episode that we have with Christian coming up. Mike, anything else you want to ask Christian before we let him go for the night? It's always
don't
always
open up that Pandora's box. Yes, I have a
right.
bunch of questions, but I'll spare Christian the next 10 hours of his life.
Hey,
well, you can always send him a note.
Yeah.
He is in Discord, so we can. Speaking of that, if you want to join us in the Discord group, there's a great way to do that. Head out to theaverageguy.tv/Discord. Lots of great conversations going on over there. We'd love to have you part of it. Again, in 2 weeks, we're going to go to Discord for the post show on the 27th. So if you want to join us that way, Christian, start looking at your calendar. We'll book you before we even get you off the show tonight. We'll take a look at your calendar. Big thanks to Maplegrove Partners. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting. You heard about it tonight from people that you know, and now you know them. What are you waiting for? I mean, everybody else's services are going up. $10 a month and Christian, like, it's great stuff. Check it out, maplegrovepartners.com. Love to see a couple of you make the jump. Come on, you got a domain. You've been waiting to do something. 2022 is the year. Put on a Maplegrove Partners and let's get this thing rolling for him. If you want to leave a message, if you got a message for us that you want to leave, you can call us. Nobody calls anymore. Go to homegadgetgeeks.com. There's a little record button. You can just right from your phone leave a message for us. 30 seconds. We'll play it here right on the show. You can always send me an email if you want to go old school. I used to, when I was a kid, I would dial the phone with the rotary. I feel like email is the equivalent of the rotary dial thing. Like, it's just so bad. It's just so, but if you want to do it, Jim at theaverageguy.tv. Super easy. You can just send me an email. I love to get them. There's so many other great ways to communicate, but if you want to do it via email, you can do it that way as well. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv live. Christian, you did HelloFresh. Do you guys stick with it, or did you drop it?
It's funny. I have this very interesting system for HelloFresh. So we used it fairly amount, and then I switched it to the setting where it's like once a month schedule.
Yep.
And then I like do this dice roll thing where it's like, if I remember to block it, it's blocked. And if I don't, a box shows up in my door and I'm like, babe, let's do HelloFresh.
It's kind of nice, isn't it?
I just went to the grocery store and it's like, it's good. It's good. So
yeah, you got to plan a little better.
It's worked out fairly well though, because almost all the times it's dice rolled has been when we're towards the end of like, we do like one big like grocery shop. I know it sounds crazy, but like for the two of us, we can go grocery shop once and it covers like 3 or 4 weeks. And they've always kind of timed nicely towards being towards the end of that, where it's like, you just need a little bit more to get to the next shop. So it's been a nice last mile thing. And I've certainly learned a lot more about cooking by doing it. So
for sure.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Good. Well, if you want to take advantage of it, there's all kinds of free offers. Theaverageguy.tv/HelloFresh if you want to get that done. Christian, I got a negative comment on YouTube just a couple days ago from maybe the last Cyber Frontiers episode you and I did together, and I think we must have talked about HelloFresh too much because somebody brought the comment was enough about HelloFresh.
Wow.
So yeah, I was like, wow, I didn't really realize we talked about it that much, but we might have talked about, because I think I just been there and we've been anyways. If you want to take advantage of that, you can do it as well. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. We'll do a little bit of post show since we got Christian. Can you hang out with us for a few minutes, Christian?
I'll be here, no rush.
We'll do a little bit of post show as long as you can stay around. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody. You got to go, Mike? Are you good?
I will actually jet out here in just a little bit, but when you were mentioning everyone's bookmarks when we were talking about switching over to a new computer.
Yeah.
By the way, for anyone who is running like self-hosted stuff, and especially if you're on Unraid, if you haven't looked at Heimdall yet, really cool little self-hosted. It's just one, web page, and it's a little dashboard with all links to all your stuff. I've just been really enjoying. That's now my homepage. Pops up beautiful. You can set the background. You can. In each of those little links on your dashboard, you can actually connect in if there's an API. So like on that dashboard, Tatuli just shows me if someone's actually watching anything on my Plex server without actually having to click into Tatuli. And like SAB and ZB like shows me if it's downloading something. So Heimdall is Heimdall. So I know a lot of people in here are into like dashboards and links and good one.
Christian, February 17th. Have you back?
Let's see.
Or anything after the 17th?
Looks good right now. Take it.
It looks good. Okay, I'll put you in.
Take it.
Boom. That's the way I like to do it. Let's strike while the iron is hot. You know. If so back to T-Mobile for internet for home. Well, do you think so? Like, you know, sometimes I'm out in the smoke shack, and I'm trying to come in on my Cox Wi-Fi router, which has got public Wi-Fi, but it's terrible. It just doesn't make it. I end up using I'm using my phone as a hotspot. Do you think if I go with their router or with their modem, do you think I'll get better SSID or better Wi-Fi coverage, or would it be similar?
For which service?
For T-Mobile.
It all comes down to what radios T-Mobile has put in that router, and then also you're talking about range. So like, how far is your furthest point that you like to use your internet?
Yeah, and that's actually a good idea. Since I've gotten this new, I got the new Gigablast. I could be moving that to a different location where it's even closer to where I'm trying to get the Wi-Fi outside. I never have done that since I got the new router. But if I'm going to ditch it, maybe when I get the T-Mobile one, I'll put it there to begin with. Just see what kind of connectivity. Listen, it's not that hard to connect to my phone and use my phone as a hotspot, and it works great. I get 300 down and 100 up or whatever, and I do Zoom calls out there. I smoke cigars and do Zoom calls. It's not like I need it, but I want it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's more about range than it is maxing out that peak band of what it can do. So like, then you start looking at things like Eero Pros or like Netgear Orbi Mesh, where you're going to get solid range. That thing's going to blast Wi-Fi like out to your whole neighborhood, but is still going to kind of give you that balance. So I would say the router that comes with any of these providers is probably good for 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. And if it's placed correctly in a home and there's not major interference hurdles to deal with. But certainly if you're trying to do like outdoorsy type stuff, you probably
across the yard. It's in the corner, it's in the other corner of the yard.
Yeah.
And listen, it's a miracle I get it out there. I mean, I just think, it's a miracle I'll get a solid, 10 down and 5 up that way on Wi-Fi. It's the problem is it's spotty. So you're trying to do video over really bad Wi-Fi.
Unify makes a really good outdoor affordable access point that I've actually used indoors. They're actually little sticks, and you can just stick it up. It's got the antenna.
Yeah, I've thought about that's been the next step is but then every time I go to buy every time I go to buy it, I go, I could just do this with my phone. Why?
Right. Yeah.
Why am I even, it just
you run wires and cables.
Yeah, no, that I was even contemplating running a wire out to it. And I'm like, well, okay, got to get a trencher, and then I got to cable it in. And I was like, well, but wait, I can do it on my phone. Like literally a couple button pushes on a really nice screen. And I set it up I have a little shelf that I set it up on that, and it works.
Yeah.
So it's
you just use the phone. Not even just skip the laptop part.
Oh, let's not get crazy.
Just get your little. Remember how we used to do the live streams? Just get a boom arm and stick your phone on the boom arm.
Yeah,
like we used to do Periscope when we used to.
I like the bigger screen. I take a
forget you're
laptop
old
out there.
It's hard for you to see.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. But Christian, you know how we obsess, we do these technology projects and then we obsess about getting it right for every single scenario that we will never ever have a, we got a 1 in 10,000 chance of that actually happening.
The sign of a good engineering instinct.
You're just, and so you're just obsessed. Like, I can't, there's these problems that I've been trying to solve, and you just can't stop thinking about them. You're like,
yeah,
let's see. Okay, maybe I could do a point to point. I even started looking into, like, how can I do the power Ethernet over power? So plug those in and take it out, and then one of the boxes was like, yeah, you really shouldn't use these with power strips. They really need to be plugged into the wall. And I was like, oh, that's out, because the whole shed runs off a power strip. That's the whole concept out there. I run a 30-foot cable out to it and power the shed. But I'm obsessed with getting using my home internet from the shed. And I'm like, I'm out there once a week, and it's for an hour and a half, and the phone works just fine. In fact, it's probably better than anything I could get in the house. So, because the T-Mobile connection here is just lightning fast. We get the UC that shows up, the 5G UC that shows up on the phone. And
have you run a speed test on your phone?
Yeah. You want to know what it is?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if I hadn't. Hold on. Let me just run one right now.
Is UC equivalent to ultra wideband on Verizon?
I think so.
I don't think it would
Christian?
be. I mean, that ultra wideband on Verizon, you have to be within, you have to be able to see that access point. And so I doubt it's
okay.
That fast.
So I don't know. I know it is faster than the 5G. It's it's kind of their ultimate or whatever. Hold on.
When I'm at Henry Dorley Zoo, Jim, on ultra wideband with Verizon, I'm getting over a gigabit. I'm getting like 1.3 gigabit at the zoo.
Okay,
it's wild.
Quick. So 18 milliseconds of ping.
And you're in your basement. We got to keep that in mind.
I'm in the basement. Yeah. No, we'll just full disclosure. I'm in the basement now. When I was running the old service, with the gigabit, I get 900 down or whatever. I'm getting 350, so 350 down, and it looks like 50. Look like it's going to come in around 50 up.
That's awesome.
In the basement, not even trying. Now, and that's, to be honest, I get 35 up, 900 down, and 35 up with Cox. But if I could get this for $50, okay, yeah, I'll take it.
And more upload off the bat.
No bandwidth caps, and and that when depending upon where I'm standing in here, it gets even better. So yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer, but again, it's one of those things like, oh yeah, I could set up this antenna and it could come off the side of the house, and then I could point at the shed and have a receiver, and I'm like, or I could just use my phone.
For a hot second, I thought you were making fun of me and ham radio. Like, I can put this antenna on my house, and I thought you were going to go down a path of
wow.
Ed Sullivan.
My brain did go down the same way of, I bet I could get really good signal if I attach that to my ham radio antenna. I'm going to need a really short antenna though. But
Ed said the other day. So Ed and I were in the shed, we're chatting, and he says, we're having all kinds of connectivity problems, and he goes, maybe you could get a ham radio and connect to Wieger, and then he could feed that into the internet and send it to me.
Or we just get you both HF ham radio rigs and hope to God the propagation gods are in your favor and you can actually talk to each other.
Do ham radio over, but you can't do video. I mean, it's a lot of fun to see them, So yeah. I'm not too big of a fan of that, but
those phones we could just call too.
Or I could just use my phone. Like it is so freaking bizarre how many times I tried. And Christian, the other thing is, I think because we're part of the PC first generation, and you were really, really young, so you're younger than us, but we always think in terms of PC first. Like, you always kind of think, well, no, I gotta have a computer do this thing. Yeah. And you're like, no, actually, you know what? This is a computer. It'll do it just fine, type deal. But, I like a bigger screen when I'm chatting with folks, and that mic, that's one of the things. It's just a little small.
Yeah.
you know, but I could.
Yep.
I've done it from the deck. How's your deck? Christian, did you guys do anything? Did you do any deck upgrades? Because didn't you had a pretty nice deck in the back there. Were you going to do something different with it, or
I'm trying to remember, what did we already have done the paint and the
you might have
stain?
I think you had just painted it when I was there.
Yeah, we haven't done much more with that.
You guys
one
spend much time out
since.
there?
We spend a lot more time out on the front one, on the
Yeah.
porch.
Yeah, that's that's a sweet porch.
We were gonna have in the fall, we were gonna have them strip the top layer of spar varnish off and like make it look to the nines. And the temperatures had just started getting too cold, where like spar varnish really needs like a dry day at 70 degrees to like set correctly. So we're like, okay, that's fine. Like we'll do it early in the spring, basically in the next like time it gets up to that temperature. But honestly, we've spent a lot more time working on the inside. So I've replaced all of the like basement like drop-in ceiling, and we've painted everywhere, and we've changed out every type of fixture you could imagine, and
Nice.
door handle, and just like a lot of the like kind of mundane stuff, but it adds up, you know.
Well, you were painting when I was there, and you were kind of doing it room by room, picking colors and starting to.
Do you or your wife kind of get a kick out of that? Do you enjoy doing those sort of home upgrades?
We do, like especially during the pandemic. It was awesome to just like be able to spend that time together, just kind of taking one project at a time and knocking it out.
It makes a huge difference when you enjoy it.
Yeah. And I mean, I've spent a lot of time building out the basement. So like we have a workout area now. So kind of like a mini home gym, which is conveniently located in the next partition over from the home theater. And the next partition over from that is my home and work office. Next partition over that is the server room where I got the racks, and I've been building out all sorts of gear. And I built a workbench there to, take boxes apart and deal with stuff. So I basically never need to leave my basement. I can come down here, I can eat, I can sleep, I can work out, I can be entertained, I can build servers, I can repair fiber, I can work on ham radio. It's a paradise down here. And then we've had a lot of fun. So I have rack for all the dumbbells. I'm still spacing out. I'm like 2 inches short from getting the bench press rack where I want it. So I'm thinking a little bit more about that, but we've bought all of the floor padding. So like the nice, like thick foamed square tile grid system. We've got pretty much all the dumbbells we need at this point on racks. We have an elliptical, we have a reverse incline bench, standard bench, and then just kind of the mats and odds and stuff. And like that gets you most of the way there. Once I have a rack for bench and squat, like that's all I'm going to put in. Like that's fine.
Just a reminder, you do need some sunshine from time to time. So
yes, there are 2 windows that provide
come
that
out
function.
of the basement every once in a while to get.
And one is gym facing, so it's good.
Yeah,
it's gym facing.
Mike, how's your basement coming along?
It's not, because the guy still hasn't been able to do the window. Well, I don't know if this guy bailed with my deposit money, so we need to get a hold of him. Yeah. There was a lot of like, oh, the ground's too cold, or we can't get the window in stock, because apparently the supply chain shortage also affected windows.
It just about everything had a.
Yeah, so we kind of like, okay, well, we're in no rush to do it in the wintertime. So when the spring comes around, we'll get that project back up.
2 windows. I have 2 old school windows to replace. I have the old 60s windows, so it's single pane, metal. And they leaked. I swear to God, they had like mini fans in them. They would leak and suck the cold air in. It was just they were letting more cold air in than was even out there. And so we years ago now, I sealed them up with spray foam insulation.
That's what I did to mine.
Yeah. So I just got today a Bosch hammer drill because I need to chisel out some of the they put a little concrete footer on that to kind of hold that window in. Well, you can buy now 16 by 32 by whatever a block is. 8 inches I think a block is 8 inches. Okay. And you literally just chisel them out and put them in and screw them into the sides, and put a little spray foam or caulk around it, and the window's in. So and then they're double pane sliding. You can actually open them. Screens. The screens had been long gone. So that's the next project. So I was pretty excited when I pulled the Bosch hammer drill out. It's got one of those handles. I should have brought it down tonight. It's got one of those handles, like it's like a D handle, and then it had the handle up front, and it was pointing down. And Sammy goes, "That looks like a machine gun." And I was like, "It's a hammer drill. This is going to be so cool."
It's even better than a machine gun.
It's even better. Yeah, totally. That's got all these settings and stuff. So I've got a little window work of my own to do. Wieger, I got a hammer drill. We'll just come over and cut that block out. And,
seriously,
between the two of us, we should be able to knock that thing out.
Yeah.
You trying to place the window or enlarge in the size of the window?
He needs to put an egress in there.
I have 2 windows that are not egress windows, but we're putting the bedroom actually on the opposite end that doesn't even have a window. So they're digging out a completely new egress window over there. And then that triggers, because I play hockey with the contractor who's going to be doing the basement finishing work. And he keeps asking me, he's like, "You still haven't gotten that window done?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "All right, well, just let me know." All right. So it'll probably be a summer project.
Yeah, well, hopefully
it's worked out though. It's giving me a chance for crypto to rebound. So
that's true.
Get a nicer basement. Crypto rebounds a little bit more.
Has come back a little bit from where it was. Getting a little scary there. I was like, maybe it's
I didn't know if the basement was really possible anymore. I was like,
maybe it's time to buy again.
Yeah,
I always have that thought, and I need to start pulling the trigger, because immediately when I have that thought, it goes back up. So that needs to be my buy. Can you please
have that thought again? Because we need some more.
Well, I don't want to buy now. Just rebound it. I was kind of waiting to see if it hit a bottom again. And so, guys, if you're listening live, thanks for coming out. Appreciate the comments in the chat room. And you got to see this. John says bailing with your deposit money from a lawyer. Not a solid plan.
Not a solid plan.
Not a solid plan.
I'm not going to go out, but I know a lot of people who go after him. So.
Gavin said, "I just joined as I heard somebody mention Unraid, racks, and windows." Wrong racks, wrong windows. Well, Gavin, in the live or in the recorded show, join us on Saturday and come listen to it. Then live, if you can, or whatever works for you. But Christian spent quite a bit of time talking about the other racks and windows and some Unraid. So you want to, not a lot of Unraid, but guys, thanks for coming out tonight. We will see you next week. Who's on next week? I think, Marv is back. He's launching that brand new, what was Pod Nuts. I contacted him and said, "Hey, I let the cat out of the bag." And he goes, "Oh," I said, "Was that a secret?" And he goes, "Actually, I was getting ready to announce it. So you're okay." So I was like, okay. I thought I'd broken NDA.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yikes. So anyways, we'll see you guys next week. Marv's back. We'll have some more enterprise tech chat next week. We'll see you guys.